The two short films which you are about to see were recorded by Mr. J.S. Christopher, who was a mature student at Alsager Emergency Training College in 1947-48. This emergency training scheme was introduced by the then Ministry of Education because of problems in the nation's schools. During the war period 1939-45, very few men had been trained as teachers, and so to overcome this situation, men were encouraged, upon their demobilization, to undertake a one-year course of intensive teacher training in various establishments throughout the country. The scheme operated during the period 1946 to 1950. Because the emergency scheme was temporary only, the ministry accommodated the students in disused wartime premises. One of these was Heathside Hostel in Alsager, Cheshire, which was built in 1940 and during the war had accommodated over 1,000 women who worked at the nearby Radway Green Royal Ordnance Factory. With the cooperation of the Cheshire Education Authority, the premises were quickly converted into temporary classrooms and residential quarters. The first course at Alsager started in January 1947, and Mr. Christopher, known by everyone as Chris, was directed by the ministry to Alsager. During the war, Chris had served in the RAF, where he had been regarded as an expert in photography and visual aids of all kinds. He quickly established himself at Alsager, and it wasn't long before he roamed the college establishment with his beloved 16mm Bolex camera. Both films are silent. The first, shot in black and white, is a record of life in the Emergency Training College in 1947. The second film, in colour, is a record of the official opening of the rebuilt permanent college by Princess Margaret in May 1969. She was at the time Chancellor of the nearby University of Kiel, to which the Cheshire College of Education, Alsager, was associated. In 1969, Chris had by then retired, but as a regular attender at annual college reunions, he willingly agreed to take his Bolex camera back to Alsager to make this second recording. This 1947 film opens with general shots of the newly converted college premises. Not very attractive scenes, but so far as the ex-service students were concerned, it was home from home, because for the previous 5 to 6 years, most of them had been billeted in similar surroundings during their war service. The next clip was a record of the official opening of the Emergency Training College. On the left is a Mr. Fleming, an Under-Secretary of State at the Ministry of Education. In the centre is Mr. F.F. Potter, Cheshire's Director of Education, and on the right is Mr. S.H. Woodiwiss, the first principal of the college. The following scenes depict exhibits in the various classrooms, such as science, light crafts, handicraft, art and biology. On the right is Sir Wesley Emberton, chairman of the College Governors, and in the centre, Frank Price, who was the head of the handicraft department. On the right is Mr. Woodywis, the principal, and two of the members of the then governing body. An outside visit to the Peak District by students of the Geography Department is then shown. This piece illustrates the maturity of the students, many of whom were dressed in their demob suits. Then follow scenes of a mock college parliament. Note the driver of the taxi, dressed in a white coat. He was Mr. Reuben Wesley, then a senior lecturer in mathematics, who was later that year to become the Chief Inspector of Cheshire Schools and then to return to the college in 1960 as its second principal. Sports Day followed on what appeared to be a hot summer's day in 1947. No provision had been made for playing fields for the temporary college, but with their typical ingenuity, the students had themselves hired an adjoining field from a local farmer. They mowed it and worked and marked it out for the various sports. They also used it for rugby and football matches. Note the variety of head coverings, not only on the student, but also on the principal and his guests. Mr. Woodywis again, Mr. Sanderson, Deputy Principal, Mr. Ramshaw, Head of History, and Dr. Smolden, Head of Music. The following scenes illustrate teaching practice in a Stockport school. Almost all schools in the north and east of Cheshire were used for this purpose. Each morning between 7 and 8 a.m, a fleet of hired coaches would leave college and return between 5 and 6 p.m, when teaching staff would be available to interview students and give advice on the day's activities. I imagine that these young lads, as shown, are now in their 70s and all retired. To counteract the intensive academic courses, it was essential for the students to relax, and many formal and informal leisure activities were held in the college assembly hall. The slapstick scenes now shown were no doubt part of some pantomime. The standard of entertainment provided by some members of the student body was very high, due to the fact that some of them had been involved before the war in the professional entertainment industry. These final shots of the college establishment were taken from the wartime air raid observation tower, which was situated on top of the present old central building. Just what the symbols on the flagstaff mean, I have no idea. Before we leave the 1947 film, I should perhaps say that despite the austerity of their surroundings, the students were very comfortable in the premises. The residential accommodation consisted of individual rooms located in 15 temporary H blocks, Similar in many aspects to the premises, the students had been billeted in during the wartime service, both at home and overseas. Many of these students returned to college for reunions in the 1960s onwards and were, to their regret, accommodated in the new halls of residence. They much preferred to be in the old huts, which at that time were being demolished. Although the academic content of their one-year courses under the emergency training scheme was very limited, it was recognized that this deficiency was more than made up by the maturity of these students and their experiences of the war years. They were indeed a breath of fresh air to the post-war teaching profession. The second film records the official opening of the rebuilt college in May 1969. Up until the late 1950s, the future of Alsager in its temporary wartime construction was seriously in doubt. However, fortune smiled on it, and because of national teacher shortages in the 1960s, it was agreed that the college should be rebuilt and its student intake enlarged. The rebuilding program commenced in 1961, and it was not completed until 1975. During this period, the student roll increased from its original 300 to 1,500. In 1973, Alsager College was recognized as the largest local education authority college in the country. The film opens with general views of the college grounds and buildings. Quite an improvement on the opening scenes in the 1947 film. It also shows the erection of the commemorative plaque in the main entrance, which later in the day would be unveiled by Princess Margaret. The royal party and various dignitaries and the princess are welcomed by the Lord Lieutenant of Cheshire, Lord Evesham, the principal, Mr. Reuben Wesley, the chairman of Cheshire County Council, Alderman Dews, and the chairman of the college governing body, Alderman Wright. Luncheon for guests, visitors and students was served in the dining hall, and then everyone gathered in the assembly hall for speeches made by the princess, chairman of governors, and the principal. That is the Chairman of Governors, Alderman Ted Wright. That was the end of the Princess's speech. Followed by a speech by the Principal, Mr. Reuben Wesley. A tour of the new buildings and grounds then took place, and during this tour the Princess took tea with the Students' Union in one of the new halls of residence. We are back in the teaching departments now. That was the handicraft department.